stage and the power stage. The open stage is just downstairs, and there we have startups, the owners of startups who are giving their spiel, and you have a chance to do direct Q&A with them. There is the power stage just around the corner. There are workshops going on there, and you can stop by and participate in those workshops. Okay, here on this stage last year, I moderated the panel discussion. The topic was monetizing the new world of sharing. Now, all of the people who participated agreed that social media and sharing had only made minute contributions to their bottom line, at least in the current ways that we measure results. But they were optimistic that we are in the nascent stage of a huge development. So where are we today, 1 year later? Our next keynote speaker says that social collaboration has indeed only tepid results. He agrees with that. But he's here to show us how social collaboration can be a positive tool for your workforce and improve how your business runs. So please help me welcome SAP's Vice President and General Manager of Enterprise, Social, and Collaborative Software, Mr. Sameer Patel.
Thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time, and hi, everybody online as well. So what I wanted to do today was start off with the idea that the share economy is a myth. No one's thrown me off stage yet, so I'll keep going. So I think we've seen this out there. We've seen essentially a lot of statistics that talk about the value of enterprise social and collaborative ways inside organizations. And if you look at some of the statistics out there, it shows that even just from a growth rate from a software standpoint is 42%. $4.5 billion in value through 2016 that customers are willing to spend on as they look at buying these software packages. What is this enterprise social software that we're talking about? This is the software that is designed to help us connect employees, customers, and partners. Generally built off of 3 or 4 big trends about 7 years ago. We called it a bunch of things like Enterprise 2.0, social business, social enterprise. And the idea was centered around one of 3 different value propositions. The first one was we looked at the success that we had with things like Facebook and said, it would be great if we could connect enterprises in the same way. Get our customers, our partners, and our employees to connect seamlessly, break the walls inside the enterprise, and have them start engaging with them, connecting, talking, and working in a more productive way. The second one was email killing. Email's getting too much. It's time for us to, there's information overload, and it's time for us to find better ways to communicate, collaborate. There's probably nobody in this room who believes that they get too little email. And then the third was knowledge management, and we believe that we could find better ways and recast what the promise was around knowledge management and file sharing that happened about 7 or 8 years ago. And together, this was the promise behind the kind of growth rates that we saw in the market, right? And the promises that were made starting in 2006. But let's get real, it's not really working. What I mean by that is there was a time where we were looking at this and there were thousands of articles and blogs and news articles written about the promise of social software, but the research is now out that suggests that 77% of employees never use their enterprise network and 3% of them sign up once a day. So you ask yourself, there's this big promise around the share economy that we're talking about here, about connecting people, connecting enterprises, connecting employees, connecting customers, connecting partners. Why is it that it hasn't really been materializing? Has the share economy failed? And it's actually even worse when you look at it from an executive standpoint, because when you start to put the value of sharing and connecting and the technology and the investment required through the same litmus test that we put when we bought CRM, or we bought ERP, or we bought supply chain, and we were ready to spend tens of millions of dollars around this. And you're asked, what is the value, just like you were when you were ready to make investments in those technologies. Back then, it was a certain set of capabilities, core features, innately designed to sit and mimic how you work at work, and it went through a set of features and technologies and capabilities, business value solutions that directly impacted the problem. If you were in sales, you understood what CRM actually offered and made a decision to buy it or not. When we start putting metrics like this that you see on the board, productivity, collaboration, transparency, connect more, it's a derivative value that someone has to take a leap of faith to try to understand how will this stuff that I do here actually impact what I'm doing in a direct way that I can actually be able to show direct value from the types of investments that are required around this. So, why is this? It's because the idea that we could lift Facebook-type metaphors and just dump them in the enterprise and they would magically work was actually a very false proposition in terms of how work actually happens. Today, we have social networking inside the enterprise that help us connect. That's happening in a silo somewhere on a fifth browser that I may or may not use. And the work is actually happening somewhere else. And the idea around making the analogy that if it worked in the public domain like Facebook, it will work in the enterprise, doesn't actually stack up, because on the public networks, when you use Facebook, there is intent behind what you do. There is a spark to actually work together. There's a photo I put on Facebook. What's in it for me is that my mother will see her grandson. And my mother will log on because that's where she sees photos of her grandson. It's that simple. And we have similar use cases in our lives when we talk to friends and stuff like that. In the work environment, it's very different. Work, those sparks for collaboration are happening somewhere else. And so this is where we work today. We have to baseline where we work today before we start to show organizations the value of these new ways of work. We have to level with them. And the work actually happens, as you see it here. It happens in applications where we work. It's our call center applications that we use to interact and work with customers. It's documents that we work on. It's email. It's our data systems that give us business insight, those areas where we actually look at and drive big decisions for our business. And social is happening again in a disconnected place inside the enterprise. And so what happens is that there's this initial excitement in terms of how we deploy these standalone social technologies. And there's day one, you will embrace it. 8 o'clock in the morning, you will be the first thing that you will do is check the social network. Then it starts becoming 10 o'clock, then noon when you're having lunch, then maybe in the afternoon. And then it just becomes a nice to have, where the true promise of how these things can actually transform how we work just never sees the light of day. But it is a big opportunity. And what is that? Where do we go from here? Do we throw in the towel and declare the share economy or the social, the value of social enterprise is dead, right? No, it's actually not even as big as what you saw from IDC in the previous draft. It's even bigger. And I was obviously just being sensational by saying it's a myth. I actually think the share economy is brilliant. The question, though, is how do we look at it? And McKinsey's come out with some amazing research, I think, which is some of the best research out there. And if you get a chance to look at it, look it up on the web. You'll find it. It's come out of the Global Institute. And they looked deeply at just 4 industries. 4 industries. They looked at advanced manufacturing, they looked at retail, consumer packaged goods, and professional services. And just based on those 4 industries, they made a really, really good case of a new design around how social works, where it starts to bring it's a confluence of how it actually can directly start to impact value inside the organizations and how we intertwine it into the fabric of our organizations, our infrastructure, our technologies, where it starts to, unlike what's been happening in the last 6 years, where there's massive behavior change for you to say, I'm going to stop using email and actually use this tool, it starts to directly impact the things that we are tasked to do in line with the KPIs that we have today. And I really suggest you look at this research. So with that backdrop, how do we go about executing what I think is going to be the next chapter in how we work, the future of economy, and where we will truly realize the value of share economy that we've been talking about at this event? And I think this is one of the fundamental mistakes that happened with social over the last 6 years, is we started to manufacture these magic metrics that nobody cared about. And we didn't really stop and look at what are those fundamental things that drive every organization, and can we make a case for where connecting our employees, our customers, our suppliers, our partners in ways that directly impact the performance objectives that we've set as organizations, starting with how we are driving revenue, how we're managing costs, how we're mitigating risk, the promises we've made to our shareholders, and then looking at the tactical execution plans that we have that come across it. And I believe fundamentally that if we do not apply these same metrics to the value of connecting people, it will be another Mickey Mouse technology that will be there in the enterprise that we think is good, it's great, it's fastly commoditized, but it is not really driving core value inside the enterprise. And so, sticking with the theme of sort of looking at the backdrop, today, if you just look at the investments inside our organizations, we have made massive investments around core technology that supports what's called system of record inside organizations, our CRM systems, our analytics systems, ERP, supply chain. And the idea behind these technologies, and I work for SAP, and obviously for 40 years we've done this, the idea behind these technologies was that there are repeatable processes inside organizations where these technologies can actually move from paper to a digitized process, but also in a way where we add consistency to every process inside the organization. If there's a way to actually close and approve an invoice, there's a standard way, it takes you through a set of steps. If there's a way for you to deal with customers and answer questions for them, there's a standard way for you to answer the question, look at the knowledge base, get the answer, do the output, you're done. But what we started to do at SAP when we were looking at this, and I think this is just something from an industry standpoint that is another approach to look at this, and I invite discussion around this, is instead of looking at this tussle that the market has been having over the last 6 years, and in terms of the value proposition of typical transaction systems known as system of record, and then systems of engagement, which is the social networking metaphors, is forget both those for a minute. How do you start to design the day in the life of for typical functions inside the enterprise? What do your sales teams actually do from 9 to 5? Your marketers, your product developers, your suppliers, people on procurement, your partners. And how do you start to reassess the blend between typical systems of record and transactional systems, which will never go away and you'll always need, and the ability for them to actually work in collaborative ways digitally that mimics what they would do in the real world? If I'm in sales and I get a call and there's a customer to work on, well, the next thing I do is walk over to a conference room and try and find the 4 people. How can we use technology for them so where we can use smarter social networking for it to identify the best experts inside the organization, show up where they actually need it, and actually infuse or feed into the energy, rather, that they were already moving in, versus going into them and saying, there's this massive behavior change you have to go through, and I promise you, if you get social, you'll get there. That has been the big impractical part in terms of how they're working on. So the transformational opportunity comes from what we call looking at the value of share economy concepts to close business loops. And I'll walk you through a couple of those as we go through this. So, I think the one area where we've actually seen some success around this has been, in the area of customer performance, and I think Jonathan Becker, our SAP CMO, is in the room somewhere. But one example is how companies have done this using community networks to be able to drive interactions and build different kinds of relationships with their customers. And SAP has one that's about 2.1 million users on that network, B2B, where you start to bring people together. Traditional CRM, however, said it's about leads, it's about opportunity management, it's about the structured processes inside organizations. But as you start to look at the social customer that's out there today and the needs that they have, and you look at the footprint and the data that they have before they even start talking to you, it's pretty fascinating when you compare that to just supporting them via typical transactional systems. They know more about your products and your services before they even call you. They have gone online and they've looked at all sorts of vertical networks, and they know the good, the bad, what works, your service levels, they know everything. There's very little data that they need. And when they come in and they want to do business with you with that amount of data, what kind of relationships do they expect that you build with them and they build with you so that this is something that's long-lasting? That won't come from traditional CRM alone. We need that. That's our system of record. That'll come from how we design customer networks that are integrated into the transactional experience so that we can serve them in a way that actually makes a difference. You have a customer, calls in. Your call center rep looks into the call center application knowledge base. The answer is not there. What do you do? Where's the network of people that can actually help support these customers? How have we infused the share economy concepts into the way work actually happens? And you start seeing huge transformation opportunity. That same McKinsey report that I showed you earlier said that there's $140 billion of untapped value just in the retail and CPG sectors around how we do SFA, Salesforce automation, and marketing today. Right? It won't come from having a standalone siloed networking system, I can tell you that. We've seen the research already. Talent performance is another very interesting one. We spent the last 10 years, again, considering that to improve talent, there are these structured applications that can do it all. We buy performance and goal management applications. We buy learning systems. We buy onboarding capabilities. But what that does is that it does a really good job of top-down information, meaning it's great for disseminating courseware in the case of learning. It makes sure that you get all by policy, you've got all the information you need. Really good job. You can check off all the check marks in terms of what people need to take. But the real knowledge inside the organization is actually sitting in your peer's head. And how are you as an organization wired technologically to be able to gain the benefit of first even knowing who the experts are in the organization and then knowing who to reach out to? How are you bringing those unstructured concepts around what we call the share economy right into the very experience where people go and learn? The people who touch your customers mostly are the ones who are not sitting at your office. If you're in retail, it's probably a contingent worker at the retail store. If you are in manufacturing, it's the factory worker who knows more about every component that goes into your product. What about the knowledge in the heads of these people? How are we getting these things out? They will not come from structured systems. These will come from how we're connected with peers, with smart technology, on a smartphone, video enabled, so you can capture these moments and make it institutional knowledge. These are real organizational problems that KPIs exist for and are strategic way up into the C-suite, not sharing blogs, wikis, forums, which has been the bedrock of a lot of these social technologies. And that's where the transformational opportunity comes from this. Financial performance, again, a place where you would think social has no place. But in the work that we're doing as we're building out our social technologies, we're bringing to bear SAP's 40 years of experience and knowing how business process works, as well as industry experts. And it turns out that financial processes could use some of this as well. It's a shocker. When you actually, again, break down what happens in typical financial processes, there's collaborative sales budgeting. It's a process that every company has. Brings in salespeople, inventory, demand gen, marketing, to start to figure out what are we actually going to make this quarter. Highly collaborative, something that a CFO cares about. There are tons of invoices inside most organizational expenses that look suspect, that don't go through a transactional system. How are we bringing the right brains together in a network form quickly to be able to deal with these exception handling processes that happen in and out inside an organization? Again, infusing the concepts of share economy right into context at the point where the data showed that people networks are actually important. That's a very different model from the traditional model of, again, I like to use, my social network in the fifth tab on my browser that I never use. It's a fundamentally different way of thinking about this. And that's where the notion of performance networks start to make sense. And then finally, on the supply chain side, there was some research that, again, baseline is we have absolutely figured out how to do procure to pay. We know how to do that. We know how to do EDI better than anybody. We make sure our suppliers get paid. And we know how to pick the right suppliers. But when are we going to start to use this supply chain as a strategic asset? Why is it that we are not exposing every component of every piece of product that goes into our products, not only out in terms of bringing them up in terms of product development, but why isn't it that our marketing departments don't know that? If that's going to be one of the key points to why we're going to launch successful products. How have we broken those artificial walls inside organizations? These suppliers are people who are looking to, well, if you look at it from a company standpoint, why are we not providing the platforms as well where these suppliers can collaborate together? These are core questions that start to come through when you move out of the notion of supply chain management and you start thinking about these as large-scale business networks. And I think through what we're doing, at least at SAP, with the value that we get through Ariba and what we're doing with SAP Jam, we're starting to look at how do we detach and unlock some of that value for customers over and above what they do with traditional systems. So when you add that whole thing up, and I think the key thing here is what you see in blue, is we have figured out as organizations to get content, to get applications, to get data, and to get processes working. We've been doing that for a long time. The fundamental question is, if we want to deliver on the true value of getting people connected together, are we going to move into a place where my network is ready, available in real time at that point where I need to make a decision? That is a fundamentally different way of looking at it. And that's how we're infusing our thinking around this, and we have about 9 million users to show that it's actually working. But this is fundamentally, in my opinion, the different view. And what I'd like to leave you with is, generally process transformation just sounds very daunting to organizations. It sounds like it's going to be a 4-year DNA changing exercise that I have to go through. There's something different about this one, though. One is it's practical, because it isn't about throwing out what you own. It's about leveraging the investments that you made in your infrastructure technology and in your transactional technology, be that on-premise, in the cloud, wherever that might be. And this is about layering social in a way where it actually shows up where you need it the most. It's achievable because, again, it is not about uprooting technology. You have it. These are small wins you can have where you have pain points. It's not about I need to deploy it across all the different touch points. And from our perspective, being SAP, we've built it so that it's available, it's integrated, and it comes out today. So in essence, what I'd like to leave you with is, I'm a big cook, and there's a, there's a saying around making pancakes, which is you always throw the first pancake out. It sticks to the pan, the oil wasn't hot enough, the batter was too thick, and I was talking to a friend of mine here, and he said the same thing applies to Pfannkuchen, which is similar to a pancake. And in the case of the share economy, I would say it's time to throw the first Pfannkuchen out. This is the new version around how social networks will actually drive the kind of value we've been looking for. Thank you very much.
Samir, I have to tell you, I don't think I've ever heard anyone compare social collaboration to a Pfannkuchen. That's really an interesting comparison. We've got time for Q&A. Anyone in the audience right now have a question they'd like to pose? Raise your hand. We've got folks with the microphone. Anyone out there right now before we start talking?
There.
Do you see one right there? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Imad Al-Khatib. I'm from Jordan. I want to ask, what's your opinion? Is share economy principles and what you are talking about applicable on modern and high sophisticated communities like in Germany or in US? Or can we apply the same concepts on Arabic countries, for example, the none very much developed like in Egypt, in Tunisia, and so?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, in my opinion, I don't think there's different viewpoints around what social is, right? And there is the standalone social networking, there's the one that I described. Where we fall into trouble is when the behavior change, because culturally a certain culture works in a certain way, and now these technologies expect you to be radically more open than you were ready to be. I don't think it's got anything to do with mature communities or less mature, or geographically. My belief is that when we start to understand the network value to core business processes that exist today, and we can actually improve the outcomes, you start to alleviate some of the cultural and behavioral change problems that have plagued this industry when it's been standalone. You take the pressure off of this is not about being open by default, which is very difficult for many cultures, organizational or geographic, right? But when I tell you that if you have a sales department, and I'm just going to show you 3 ways to sell better. If you have corporate learning, I'm going to show you 3 ways to learn better. It's a different discussion we're having. We're not having a discussion about becoming social. We're having a discussion about better learning and better selling. And it is phenomenal how the behavior change demands on organizations starts to dwindle down when you have that approach and the technology infrastructure that can support that design of sharing. Does that make sense? Sure.
Samir, we've got a question. Let me just pull this
right
one.
Here.
We'll take this from this gentleman, and then we've got one here on the Twitter wall. But
Sure.
let's take the gentleman's question here first.
Yeah.
Ich glaube, wir haben ja Übersetzung, darf ich auf Deutsch auch stellen, ne? Meine Frage.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Ja.
Okay.
Denke ich.
Ja,
Achso,
mag ich.
Sie sprechen nicht Deutsch.
Ich kann auch Deutsch.
Also
Ja.
ich schon, aber er nicht.
Ja, aber
okay.
ich kann übersetzen.
Ja, schön, danke schön. Meine Frage, also ich wundere mich, wieso man das so unheimlich schwer tut. Ich meine, wie heißt es, Community, das muss ja für die Community irgendwelche Vorteile bringen. Solche Community hat hier keinen Bock dazu. Ne? Das ist das eine. Jetzt habe ich etwas gehört, dass McDonald's fängt über die lokalen Netzwerke mit PayPal etwas über diese Verkaufsautomatisation und so weiter. Meine Frage, was denken Sie von SAP? Die lokalen Netzwerke sind ja sehr gut für Verkaufsautomatisation, von informieren den Kunden, navigieren, bestellen, bezahlen und auch für das Belohnen. Wann kommt endlich mal so ein gescheites Ding?
Akustisch habe ich das nicht ganz verstanden. Hat jemand im Publikum das verstanden? Ganz? Ja, kann jemand?
Entschuldigung, was haben Sie nicht verstanden?
Ich habe es akustisch nicht.
Akustisch nicht?
Ja.
Also das
lauter, ja.
Ende. Ich meine, dass es sollte endlich eine Closed Loop, ein System kommen, wo der Kunde vorwählen kann, was ihn interessiert. Essen, Trinken, Brötchen und so weiter. Dann kriegt er über die lokalen Netzwerke ein Angebot. Mit einem einzigen Klick, also wie heißt es, Convenience, kann er das bestellen, bezahlen. Und ich meinte, das ist ganz wichtig. Über die lokalen Netzwerke mit Online-Mitteln können wir die Kunden auch binden, belohnen, halten.
So
das ist ausschlaggebend.
He's talking about local networks that consumers should be able to let companies know what they'd like. He's talking about food, for example. They should be able to just tell what they want to eat and drink, and they should be able to get immediate feedback. And he's asking, when is that actually going to happen? I think, and he used the example of McDonald's, saying that they wanted to do that. This closed loop that you were talking about.
So just to understand the question, is it more around when can McDonald's, in this case, is it McDonald's
he
who wants
mentioned
to
McDonald's,
figure out,
yeah.
do they want to figure out when?
What customers want, wherever they are.
Well, I would argue that data is here. I think, with the ability to mine social media data and start to deliver trends from that data, you can start to have a pretty good idea about localities and areas where they may be predisposed to liking the kind of food that you sell. And if not, what are the kinds of tweaks that need to be made? I mean, I think it's a really, really good question, because this goes back again to, the kind of work that went into doing formal market research. Used to be so heavy in terms of, and latency, right? By the time it's done, it's 7 months late and the taste might have changed. But our ability right now to be able to take exactly what you said, make sense of that data, which we do, and then be able to federate that inside the organization through social networks so that it spawns not just to my product managers who are building new products, but even through my supply chain. Why shouldn't they have the same level of customer insight to be able to design it? That future is here. That's here. Great question. Thank you.
He says he hasn't seen that yet.
No, I think it's here. I think every company has to do it. And actually, I mean, all of the big consumer brands are going after exactly this. You have any examples, Jonathan? Taco Bell? Taco Bell. Well, you mean the brand? Sorry, that's SAP CMO, and he's very passionate about this and knows more about this than I can deliver on. But talk to him when you.
Okay. Yeah, and bring Taco Bell to Germany. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, see, yeah. Okay, we've got this question here. What advice, we got time. What advice for the first step would you give to a medium-sized company wanting to go social?
Yeah. So I think, in some ways they have it easier, right? Because I think the value that a lot of medium-sized companies have is it's about that moment when they're starting to really seriously look at technology. They may not want to buy extremely expensive technology, but given the availability of cloud solutions today, the ability to start to dabble and pick the right infrastructure and then have the luxury of saying, I will get off if it doesn't work, there's a lot of flexibility. The good news is that at that strata, and I think what we're trying to do at SAP is we're bringing that to the enterprise side. But that was the first step, where you can choose wisely in terms of the technology stack that you have, because today's core applications, what we've called like CRM and ERP and those technologies, in our mid-market solutions, we're infusing this from day one. So you're actually in a better place because you're getting that kind of innovation right out of the gates, where the design of the software has taken into account this balance that I talk about between structured and unstructured, and transactions and conversations. And the design itself lends itself well to that. So yeah, that's an easy question. You're actually in better shape.
Yeah, I mean, last year we had a panel discussion. We had some medium-sized company bosses here, and they all said that social collaboration, sharing had brought basically nothing to them.
Yes.
And they were very negative on the here and now.
Absolutely.
But they wanted to be positive about at least the medium-term to long-term
So there's two things there, right? The first thing is you will never find a CEO or a CXO who will say, I don't want us to collaborate, and I don't want us to innovate. And then what happens is they look at their immediate team, and everyone nods and says, awesome, great idea. You want to take it? You chief marketing officer, like, awesome, but I got leads to bring in, right? And it becomes this problem that no one wants to really take on. But I think when you fundamentally, and this is how we believe, and this is infused in our product design for us at least, is social is not a destination. It's a key enabler of core performance objectives that you have already. And for buyers or for customers, just like the ones you mentioned, if you're not in a position where we've made these considered efforts ourselves, if social can't move the needle somewhere, it's okay. That's the only way we're going to have a serious discussion about where this can...
That's a hard thing for business to accept when they're hearing from the outside world constantly that social is the way.
Well, agreed, but I mean, ultimately the numbers speak for themselves, right? So they may be hard to hear, but you're seeing the adoption rates. And if you want to measure the market size to date, category-wise, to anything in the past like CRM or supply chain, you will see it in the numbers as well. That version has the aha moment outside of companies that are predisposed to experimentation, like high-tech's a great example. In high-tech, we will try anything. And then certain knowledge-based industries like professional services, where you get it because knowledge is the product.
Okay.
Right? But outside of that, it needs to be an enabler to a problem I have. And we believe that this approach makes that more natural.
Okay. Do we have one more question? Did I see one other hand out here? Okay. Time yeah, we got time for one more. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm from the Central Bank of West African State, Dakar, Senegal. My question was if you have any, well, how can you measure, do you have objective ways to measure the gains or benefits of this approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think this is precisely the problem that I believe at least standard enterprise social networking falls into, which is, again, we manufactured new metrics, right? Sharing, collaboration, number of users, those kinds of things, programmatic in nature. The trick, I think, and the opportunity here is, again, from a measurement standpoint, this is about looking at the established standard metrics across your typical business and seeing what kind of contribution comes from opening the network up versus coming up with new metrics. If you're looking at, if you have standard sales productivity benchmarks in your organization, stick with that and see how these things can actually start to make a difference. That's how we're looking at it. Right. Same for how there are a series of exception. It's a very technology-centric term, but what we call exception handling processes across supply chain, invoice dispute resolution, travel expense management. These are things where bringing the right people into a room, being able to make a decision together in an auditable way, starts to essentially take a lot of risk and cost outside organizations. Something that a CFO worries about, keeps them up at night. So I think from a metric standpoint, we need to start to use these concepts and ways of work to feed into those very metrics. And if they don't support a certain metric, move on, right? But I think this has been the fundamental flaw with this, is that we started to manufacture metrics that just never made it to an executive summary. Does that make sense?
Okay. We are unfortunately out of time, but we look on the Twitter wall. You've done some good PR for Taco Bell here in Germany. Taco Bell, good example for social collaboration. All right. Samir Patel, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.